Poland could become a gas logistics hub for the entire region of Central and Eastern Europe. Polish President Karol Nawrocki said that preliminary arrangements have already been made with US President Donald Trump. Poland's key assets include access to the sea and exemplary relations with the United States. For Central and Eastern Europe, this would mean the prospect of faster independence from Russian gas. For Germany, serious competition. For Russia, a reduction in its influence on the old continent, and for Poland, a huge increase in its importance on the geopolitical map of the world. This could be a political and historical breakthrough for the whole of Europe. At the V4 summit in Hungary, President Karol Nawrocki announced a plan to build a hub in Poland that will allow gas to be transported to partners in the Visegrad group. Poland can be a hub for our region, and I have already made preliminary arrangements with US President Donald Trump. Of course, we are aware that this must be a competitive offer, one that will enable the economics of other countries to develop. This is what Poland's responsibility to the region is all about. The point is that countries like the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary should be able to achieve full energy independence from Russia the way Poland has. We understand, of course, the geographical location of our partners, but I am also here to say that Poland is also jointly responsible for supplying energy, specifically gas, because of its access to the sea in our region. For now, the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary are forced to import gas from Russia, among other countries. However, each of these countries is seeking to diversify its sources of supply for this raw material. A gas transport hub in Poland would make this possible. The creation of a hub in Poland for the transmission of gas imported from across the ocean completely changes the architecture of energy security and makes the Three Seas initiative an increasingly realistic project, a project that secures economic interests and gives a sense of security to Central European countries. It also affects Germany's interests. After all, it was Berlin that wanted a monopoly on Russian gas, which it would then sell to other European countries for a suitable commission. Meanwhile, Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 have gone up in smoke, and the United States and Poland are entering the game. Germany's real power stems from the marginalization of Central and Eastern Europe. This is a sad fact that we must accept, rather than pretending to believe that Berlin will suddenly give up its own interests out of sheer goodwill. Unfortunately, our current government seems to expect us to believe exactly that. For many years, Donald Tusk, current Prime Minister and leader of the opposite political camp to President Nawrocki, claimed that Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 pose no threat to Poland's national interests. Today, when it is already known that Putin used the money from Russian gas exports to strengthen his army and prepare it for war in Ukraine, Donald Tusk claims to have always opposed the project. When discussing the threats posed by investments such as Nord Stream making Europe dependent on Russia for gas, I often felt alone in Europe. Donald Tusk is simply lying and hoping everyone forgets what his position was for all those years. He is lying the way he is because he is fully aware that, apart from TV Republica, no one will press him on this matter, and everyone will simply play along. His mouthpieces are simply loyal to him in this matter. Donald Tusk was one of the men thanks to whom Angela Merkel was able to build Nord Stream 2. Tusk himself is reluctant to speak on the matter. However, much can be gleaned from the voices of his inner circle. On the issue of Nord Stream 2, there is indeed an agreement between private companies, and it must be clearly stated that, thank God, the governments are not behind it. Calling Nord Stream an agreement between private companies is a euphemism employed by both German and Russian state sources to obfuscate the nature of the German-Russian gas pipeline. Nord Stream 2 is a private sector project. This project is entirely commercial and competitive. Poland's right wing demanded energy independence from Russia. However, work on a project to compete with Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream only began after the Law and Justice Party won the 2015 parliamentary elections. Previously, Donald Tusk had been reluctant to support these kinds of investments. We have important Russian contracts, so it is clear that we do not need too much Norwegian gas. The important Russian contracts mentioned by Tusk include an agreement with Gazprom signed back in 1993, and in 2010, during the first term of Tusk as Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the Economy Waldemar Pawlak signed an annex on behalf of Donald Tusk's government, increasing the annual supply to 11 billion cubic meters. What? Does Russian gas burn poorly in your gas stove? The agreement increased Poland's dependence on Russian exports, which, as predicted by the Polish right wing, later resulted in supply interruptions and increasingly brazen behavior from Russia, and ultimately the invasion of Ukraine. Nord Stream gives Russia a place to pump its gas and thus earn money to finance its army, which it then uses to start wars. Donald Tusk knows this, and it seems he would prefer his voters not to associate him with Nord Stream, Germany or Russia. This is characteristic of Donald Tusk. It's the same with his support of the wall on the Polish-Belarusian border. When the wall was being built in 2021, he protested, ridiculed it, and tried to prevent the project from being implemented. Russian influence is today the main threat to Europe. Gas imports to Central and Eastern Europe via Poland will drastically minimize this influence, thus hopefully minimizing the Russian menace.